Greetings, members one and all of the Salivation Nation. The fight for Venezuela's gold just got more complicated, and it's the Queen's fault. Let's explore! Gold, highly sought after by not only nation states, but also by individuals around the world. In fact, many of us in this community, well, we like to have more of it, that's for sure. And even if you're an ardent silver stacker, you understand the value of gold, and more than likely you probably wouldn't mind owning a little bit as well. Nonetheless, gold has been sought after and by Venezuela for gold that has been stored in the Bank of England. And here we can see the Queen strolling through, almost as if you can imagine a shopping cart there below her, shopping around for some bars of gold. But nonetheless, these are very heavy bars, and even though they are in the vault, they represent the Bank of England and the United Kingdom's great holdings, not only for their nation, but other nations around the world, including Venezuela. Yes, indeed. Quite an impressive array on these pallets, and pretty amazing. And I like how they contrast nicely with that blue there. Nonetheless, gold is certainly a metal that has been sought after by Venezuela over the past several years. Maduro would like to be able to get some of that gold back, and thinks that the Bank of England, and of course the Bank of England indeed is holding off on delivering that gold to Venezuela for reasons that I've documented on this channel in previous news stories. But let's get into a little bit further here, because we can see that the Bank of England here has all this gold stored for Venezuela. But in this story from the Orinoco Tribune, and is made aware of this by several members of the community here, Venezuela, Queen Elizabeth is thrown a wrench into the things there, because she has recognized Maduro as the president of Venezuela. And let's see here what the details of this are. And as before we get into this, if you find information like this in news with regards to precious metals of all sorts, I hope you will consider subscribing to the channel, maybe pressing the thumbs up button, as well as hitting the notification bell. And even if you don't really have much to say about this video, a little algorithm food by just typing "salgorithm food" will be most helpful. Yes, indeed, help to get the word out there, as well as that thumbs up. Friday, August 5th, the Venezuelan government presented diplomatic letters signed by Queen Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom, addressed to President Nicolas Maduro, in which the Queen recognizes Maduro as a head of state and government of Venezuela. These letters will be used as evidence by the Venezuelan government to demand access to the 31 tons of gold that remain seized in the Bank of England, according to Bloomberg. The president of the Central Bank of Venezuela, Calixto Ortega, said, "The diplomatic correspondence is evidence that the United Kingdom recognized Nicolas Maduro as president of Venezuela." According to Ortega, these letters also undermine the ruling of a British court that refused to return gold while ruling on the case on July 29th. In fact, here is that ruling, and I think it's apropos to look at the date of this, especially to see from this approved judgment, it was indeed on the 29th of July 2022 that this all came down. And we can see here that there's the governor and company of the Bank of England, and there you have the Maduro board and the Guaido board. There's two boards here, and that is quite important to recognize here. But nonetheless, the bullions which are stored in the vaults of the Bank of England represents about a fifth of Venezuela's $5.2 billion in international reserves, excluding the special drawing rights with the International Monetary Fund, which the country currently cannot access, added the Bloomberg report. 3 letters signed by the Queen make for an official position, Central Bank of Venezuela President Ortega told Bloomberg in Paris while returning to Caracas from London, where he discussed the issue with lawyers. He further added that the United Kingdom has issued visas to Venezuelan officials. As proof of this, he showed his own passport, which is of diplomatic status, in which 8 visas issued by London since 2018 of June have been stamped. On the other side of the board, things are more or less the same, as the British charge d'affaires in Venezuela requested a visa from the Maduro government in 2021, and it was Maduro's government that granted it. So what did the letters say? The president of the Central Bank of Venezuela showed Bloomberg 2 letters signed by Queen Elizabeth II in her capacity as head of state of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. In the first letter, she notifies him of a change in the Caribbean nation's representative based in Caracas, while in the second, she requests that Maduro accredit a new one. In another letter, a third, the Queen wrote to Maduro on behalf of the government of St. Lucia. In all 3 letters, Queen Elizabeth II used the salutation, His Excellency Nicolas Maduro Moros, President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. However, we will look at that stamping on a closer look at this and see that it is kind of a stamp, really, more or less. There you can see. I don't know. I guess that could be considered almost a letterhead of sorts, but I guess maybe not. But there is a little closer stampings here, or a little closer look at these letters, rather. But notice the date is from Buckingham Palace, the 1st of June 2022, whereas the judgment here is from the end of July, 29 July 2022. Not that is a huge time gap difference, but nonetheless, they haven't recognized the legitimacy of Maduro, at least the official stance of the government of England did not recognize him long before June of 2022. So there is that. Pretty interesting indeed. And let's see, let's get back here. So Ortega specified that his diplomatic documentation was given to him by the Venezuelan Ministry of Foreign Affairs, so it is clearly considered official information. For its part, the United Kingdom Foreign Office responded in writing to a request for comment from Bloomberg with the following text: Her Majesty the Queen does not act as the UK head of state when acting as head of state of any of her other realms. So that is the distinction here. And reiterated that London continues to recognize Juan Guaido as president in charge or interim president of Venezuela. Calixto Ortega told Bloomberg that the legal team representing the Venezuelan government will decide on its new strategy starting soon next week as the Venezuelan government prepares for an appeal against the July 29 ruling. However, Ortega added that trying to include these letters as new evidence may further delay the judicial process. It's going to complicate it even more. Meanwhile, President Maduro has warned that the London court's ruling will eventually have enormous consequences for other countries that have deposited part of their international reserves in British banks as an obligation covertly imposed by risk rating agencies, which affects the ability of countries to access loans or credits from international financial institutions. Among the same lines, Ortega pointed out that what is at stake here is London's reputation as the most neutral and reliable place to do business in the world. They say one thing in court while in fact they behave differently, he added. Despite the obvious diplomatic channel that exists between Buckingham Palace, Downing Street, and Flores, British courts, including the UK Supreme Court, have insisted on UK's clear and unequivocal recognition of former Deputy Guaido as a president of Venezuela, who, by the way, again reported his own central bank board. The contradiction has been justified based off the apparent independence of the judiciary from political decisions. However, the case headed by Judge Sarah Cockerill discussed the legitimacy and independence of Venezuelan institutions in a clear demonstration of interference in the internal affairs of other countries and contempt for the authorities of the Venezuelan state. However, despite London's insistence on supporting the illegitimate parallel administration of Guaido, Cockerill did not grant control of Venezuelan gold to Guaido either. Instead, the court ruled that this would have to be decided in a separate trial, the date of which has not been announced. So there you go. Very interesting indeed. Fascinating story. And it should be noted that there's a couple of lessons we can take from this. Number one is that, a dictatorship, especially with one with well over the vast majority of nations around the world do not recognize Maduro as legitimate, has consequences. And this is certainly the case here, where there is a conflict as to who is legitimate or not, regardless of what the Queen does, who is not an official. She is the Queen, but really that position just goes to show you that nowadays, more than ever, has really become more symbolic than anything else. And for diplomacy between some of her realms, it just goes to show you really kind of where we are at with what the influence of the crown has been in many years past, even within the reign of Queen Elizabeth. And then the other lesson here is if you don't hold it, you don't own it. For all practical purposes, really that is the case for everything. Many of us here in the United States and other places, we have some faith in our institutions. In fact, whenever you make a payment in a purchase of a product, a bullion product, whether it be gold, silver, or whatever, you are at the complete mercy of the entity from which you bought that gold or silver from to deliver in a timely manner your gold and your silver. And then you're at the mercy of the transit service, whether it be FedEx, UPS, or the Postal Service, or some other delivering agency to present that gold and silver to you. Then, once it's in your hands, then you own it. Until such time as that, it becomes essentially, a credit as to ownership. In other words, you are owed those goods, the physical gold and silver. But nonetheless, the Queen certainly has complicated some things with that correspondence. It'd be very interesting to see how this plays out in court. And likewise, we'll see what happens. The Bank of England does hold gold for other nations around the world, and it'll be very fascinating to see how that plays out. Will other nations want to repatriate their gold from the Bank of England? Who knows? Many of the reasons why it's stored there is because of the security and with some sort of faith that they'll be able to get it back at some point in time. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Would like to extend a multitude of gratitude to you all for taking the time to watch, and to encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.